Tomorrow marks 2 years since the Supreme Court's ruling that gutted the Voting Rights Act. Today, Democrats introduced a bold new bill to restore its protections.
A generation ago, Martin Luther King told parishioners at the Mother Emanuel Church in Charleston that voting rights was the key to achieving the American dream. Well, Dr. King was right then, and that ideal remains true today.
Dr. King talked about voting rights at Mother Emanuel Church. Today, we can renew the fight for those rights in honor of those who died at that church. Joining me now are two sponsors of the bill, Senator Patrick Leahy, Democrat of Vermont and ranking member of the Senate Judiciary Committee, and Congresswoman Terry Sewell, Democrat of Alabama. Thank you both for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you, Reverend Al.
Senator, you referenced Mother Emanuel Church where this horrific act this week had happened, and you referenced them in your remarks where Dr. King had spoke there years ago. Could this tragedy, Senator, help inspire a new commitment to voting rights?
Well, I would hope that we have that commitment to voting rights. Like everyone else, I decry the tragedy in the first place. It never, ever should have happened. This was a mark of some of the blatant racism we still see in this country. But let's also, we focus on what happened there. We focus on getting rid of the symbol of the flag. But let's do what is even more important. Let's make sure that the people who can decide issues like the flag have a right to vote. Right now, more and more blacks, Hispanics, others in this country are denied the right to vote. Since the Supreme Court's decision, which goes against any reasoning whatsoever, since that happened, you've seen state after state pass laws that are designed solely to disenfranchise voters. That's not a nation we should be proud of. That's a nation we should change.
Congresswoman Sewell, you know, it's been a very difficult week, not only for Charleston, but for the whole country. And I remember sitting in the Supreme Court that day at the hearing with you and Congressman John Lewis and Martin Luther King III and all of us when one Supreme Court justice talked about a racial entitlement. I remember you and I for years marching across that bridge in Selma, remembering how we got this right in the first place in your hometown. Do you think, I think that the senator said it right, symbolism is great. I want to see the symbols down. But the substance of protecting the right to vote is everything. If we don't get that, taking the flag down will only be window dressing.
I think you're absolutely right. You know, I applaud all the efforts to take down the Confederate flag. In fact, it's a long time overdue. But at the end of the day, it's about action. It's about substance over a symbol. And I think that I was honored today to be able to drop this bill, the Voting Rights Advancement Act, with Senator Leahy on the Senate side. So many activist groups have worked hard to come up with a formula, a modern day formula that will restore pre-clearance back into the Voting Rights Act. You know, those of us who are legacies of John Lewis and the movement on that bridge, we owe it to the foot soldiers to not just have a kumbaya moment like we did for the 50th anniversary that day. It was great, a lot of good speeches, but at the end of the day, it's about what we're going to do. How are we going to really rectify the situation and promote racial equality and justice for all? It starts with voter equality.
Now, Senator, I want to get into some of the details for your new voting bill. It requires 13 states to get pre-clearance for election rule changes. It says federal approval for new voter ID laws and other changes that target minority voters, and public posting of any changes to voting rules with 180 days of an election. Now, this bill goes even further than the others proposed in the past. Why are these protections needed, Senator Leahy?
Because we've seen that when you don't have those protections, Reverend, voters are disenfranchised. Look at a court that found the Texas photo ID law an unconstitutional poll tax. Well, it could have disenfranchised 600,000 voters. That's the population of my whole state.
Wow.
I mean, this is just ridiculous. We want to make sure every state has to follow the law. If any state doesn't, then they're going to have to prove to the Department of Justice why they haven't disenfranchised voters. We have areas where we know the voters have been disenfranchised over and over. Let's change that. I mean, I would say those governors and those legislators that think that they get a temporary advantage by cutting people off the rolls, what are you doing? You're diminishing this great country. You're making it less of a country. You're doing things that some of the terrorist groups from outside our borders could never do. You're taking away our right to vote. Don't do that. That is not an American way.
You know, Congresswoman, the need for this bill is so high. 21 states have passed voter restrictions since 2010, and in 14 of those states, next year will be the first time they'll be in effect for a presidential election. So many are saying, well, I didn't feel the impact. In 14 of those states, they don't kick in till now.
Yes, you're absolutely right. Reverend Al, this bill will actually have covered 13 states, including the state of Alabama. Previous bills that have been introduced while bipartisan only had 4 states that were covered. And by including Alabama, North Carolina, and South Carolina, as well as Mississippi and Louisiana, even New York and California would actually be covered under our act. I think it's so important that we protect vulnerable communities who deserve to have the right to vote. You know, Reverend Al, my dad has had a series of strokes, and over the last 10 years, he's been wheelchair bound. And I can tell you that Alabama's pernicious photo ID law really restricted his ability to vote. Now, he was highly motivated because I was on the ballot, but it took us over 5 hours to get my dad moving and into that Dallas County courthouse and up those stairs in order to get his photo ID. I think about all of our senior citizens and the disabled who have been disenfranchised by these photo ID laws. And, you know, this bill that we introduced today, I'm just so proud of Senator Leahy's leadership on this and all of the civil rights activist groups that have been so involved in writing this bill. You know, it is truly an ambitious bill, but you know what? It's all about being inclusive and making sure that all Americans have that sacred right to vote.
And it ought to be bipartisan, because I remember in 2006, I was among the civil rights leadership there. Senator Leahy and others stood as George Bush signed the reenactment, not the reenactment, but signed the reauthorization of the Voting Rights Bill. So this is something that all parties ought to be in. I have to go, but I need to ask you, Congresswoman, your reaction to your governor in Alabama ordering the flag, the Confederate flag, being taken down in Alabama.
Listen, the Confederate flag is a relic of the past, and that's where it should always have remained. I think it's important that my governor did take it down off the grounds of the state capitol. But, you know, I think the more meaningful change is to get all Alabamians and all Americans the right to vote. And I think that it's all about the substance and not just about symbol. But I am proud that he was able to remove it. It should have been left in the past where it belongs. It's always been a symbol of the fight against, you know, abolishing slavery, and so it's a symbol that doesn't have a real place in American history today. But I really want my governor and my whole Alabama delegation to do more than just take down the flag. I'd like for them to be supportive of efforts like this Voting Rights Amendment Act to be inclusive and to stop the restriction of access to voting.
Well, that's what we need. That's what we must challenge going forward. I believe that that is what our Reverend Pinckney, who I knew would want. Senator Leahy, thank you for your leadership here.
Thank you. Well, I think the Congresswoman has been fantastic in her eloquence about this, and she's right.
Well, the Congresswoman is fantastic, period. Thank you both for your time tonight.